little more. Welcome to the School of Health Radio, brought to you by 3asoh.com. That's 3asoh.com. And we are the School of Health Radio podcast. We are excited to journey with you in this health-oriented podcast. This podcast is on the subject of health. What kind of health? All manner of health. Physical health, mental health, spiritual health, and of course, even our social health, because our lives are greatly affected by our health and the health or lack thereof of others. And who am I? I am your host, T. Christopher Smith, and I'm the director of the Three Angels School of Health. It's a missionary training school, and I am a 20-year missionary veteran. I have been training missionaries for over 20 years. I have been training medical missionaries for 15 years. I am what's a farmer by trade, a biological farmer. That means that I have learned and have grown food that is highly nutritious, nutrient-dense food. We have grown fully mineralized food. And lastly, I am a Christian. If you didn't catch the fact that I was a missionary, I love Jesus and the people for whom he gave his life. We have an exciting broadcast for you today. An exciting broadcast. I'm very excited to go into some of the subjects that we're going to be dealing with today. But before we go there, let's start off with, guess what? COVID-19. How'd you know? Well, if you're going to talk about health and you bypass the biggest health related issue to hit our world since the Spanish flu of 1918. So according to our notes at the time of this broadcast, 1.3 million people at least have been confirmed with coronavirus, excluding the true numbers coming out of China and Iran and other totalitarian states. As of Monday, April the 6th, 2020, more than 10,000 Americans have died from COVID-19. Well, at least that's what they're reporting. Anyone that dies, and if there's any possibility that they might have had COVID, they don't actually go and check and see if they had it. They just declare it in the numbers. And I think that's a little bit disingenuous because there has to be a justification for all the things that everyone is dealing with to try to prevent the spread of this pandemic. It seems like they're purposely padding the numbers. Anyone who is suspected of COVID-19 and dies is counted, which means that the numbers may not be as many as we have been led to believe. So there may not be as many people with COVID-19 or who have died from it. And it looks like the death rates are much lower than projected. And I, of course, am happy about that. I don't want to be wrong. I don't want for more people to die so that we can be right. No. We want less people to die. As a matter of fact, back to the news of the day, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is in intensive care from COVID-19. Now, in other news, some judges are ordering people suspected of having the virus and refuse to stay at home to wear ankle monitors. Wow, I found that story on The Blaze. Can you imagine? They're being required to wear ankle monitors. There are at least 4 cases of that. Now, there are some who are being cited for not staying at home. Not everyone is being cited, but there are special groups, it seems, that are being cited. And who are they? These are the pro-life protesters. Apparently, abortions are still continuing. You know, I didn't even know what to say about that. But anyone protesting the abortions, yes, they have to go home. But the one who's going to get the abortion, they can go. They're saying that that's an essential element. And all who refuse to stay-at-home orders are being threatened with of having committed a crime. 4 people in Louisville, Kentucky, have been ordered by a judge to wear ankle bracelets for refusing to isolate themselves after being in contact with coronavirus patients. This was reported in CNN. 2 of the people have not yet tested positive, but they still have to wear the monitor. Now, this one here is going to hit you. Oh man, people work hard not to work. I have found this out over my many years of life, is that people work very hard to not have to work, and people work to take advantage. And of course, scam artists are working. There are fake testing sites operated by scam artists, and they're charging $250 a pop to get the test. So people, they're putting up these little booths, and they're wearing the outfits, and and they got the masks on, and they're people are giving them $250 to check and see, and the test is fake. It's not a real test. It's not a real company. And they're just getting lines of people, and this was also in Louisville, Kentucky. I don't know what's going over on in Kentucky. I heard one of their senators is down, Rand Paul. I hear he might have either he has coronavirus, or he's self-isolating because he was in contact with someone who did. In other news, statnews.com reports that Americans are underestimating how long coronavirus disruptions will last, experts say. Now, this was taken from April the 3rd, 2020. Now, Jeremy Konayadic, a senior policy fellow at the Center for Global Development, is quoted as saying, an intensive period of social distancing and national semi-voluntary lockdown will last for months, not for weeks, months. It's interesting because, it seems like every time that, they open the door and they say, okay, we only need you to do this for 2 weeks, or we're only going to do this as self-voluntary or whatever it was. And so then after that, it says, okay, well, we need to continue not till the end of April. Okay, that was the president's order. Some are saying to the end of May. And so you see these things seeming to continue. It's already written in, and the medical people are going beyond and pushing the political people, saying, listen, you have to do these things. And so the question is about moving forward on how safely we can open, says Thomas Frieden, the former director of the Center of Global Development. That's what he said. And so it's some crazy news out there today. U.S. deaths for coronavirus have topped over 10,000, we're told. Total deaths around the world are at over 70,000, almost running up close to 75,000 deaths worldwide. Now, out of 7 billion people, 7+ billion people, that's a very low number. Again, that's a very low number. And we've said this over and over again about the fact that the numbers of people who die, it's upwards of almost 900,000 people in America alone die every year from heart disease related issues. And so it's bad, but it's not as bad, but the fear is far worse, it seems, than the actual disease itself. And so today, that is our news, but I want to move on to the subject of today's talk. Oh, whew. I know I'm going to kick a hornet's nest today. I know that there are going to be people out there who are going to say no, no, no. And there's going to be disagreements. And you're going to hear some people in the background, they're going to be saying yes as they're driving or at home or wherever they are. Today, we're going to be talking about evolution, creation, and science. Because if you're going to talk about health, you have to talk about the fundamentals of what health is. And it was interesting. I was thinking about, okay, we're in our second week of podcasts. We've been putting up a podcast every day, Monday through Friday. And we're planning on doing these podcasts every day. So you're going to get 5 hours a week. That's 20 hours a month, 4 months or 4 weeks in a month. And then we do an extra special one because we do one on spiritual health on the weekends. And so that people can listen about things regarding health and spiritual things. We want to encourage people not just with their physical health or their mental health, but their spiritual health as well, to encourage them that they might be whole. So today, as we talk about evolution, creation, and science, we have to deal with the fact that, that evolution is a fairly new concept. It's a fairly new concept. It was first postulated after the founding of America. Did you know that evolution was not taught, to my understanding, at least from none of the things that I have seen, at any time during the history of the world? Now, there are people who did not believe in God, that is true, but the theory of evolution, the theory that all things began on accident and that something came from nothing without any help. I saw in one place where dirt plus time equals life. That's dirt plus water plus time equals life. That's one of the things it was talking about. And I got a couple of things that I want to mention. But, this issue of evolution is a very, very serious issue. Now, of course, you've seen that I'm a Christian, but you don't know what kind of Christian I am. Yes, I'm a missionary, but you don't know what kind of missionary I am. I'm one that believes in the Bible. I keep my Bible with me. I have it here on my desk. We have a scripture a day every day. My worldview is that of God created all things. Oh, man, it's so much easier for me than it is for an evolutionist. An evolutionist has to jump through so many hoops and account for so many things. And all I have to do is say, well, I just believe what the Bible says. And in the first two chapters of the Bible, Genesis chapters 1 and 2, I believe that God created all things, and that's that. So I believe that there is a God who is the creator of all things. And then I don't have to go through a bunch of other things. And I believe that there are laws regarding the creations that he's made. As a matter of fact, the Bible says that in the New Testament, in the book of Romans, chapter 1. And so that that because of this, that there are laws associated with all natural things. And so that's just where I come from. And as a farmer, and because of that, I have to be a scientist, because you can't be a farmer, at least not a good one, without being a scientist. Because you have to understand the science of the soil. Otherwise, you're going to have problems. Even regular farmers understand the science of the soil. They put on NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, just to make sure that you have enough of that so that you can get at least some kind of a harvest. But a biological farmer has to understand the science of the soil, has to understand the makeup of the soil, has to understand the necessities of the soil. What are the elements that the soil has and that the soil needs? And when you understand them and understand the balance that it should have, and you create or you make sure that the soil is properly balanced so that the seed and therefore the plant and therefore its production all the way to fruiting are accomplished. We have grown, and I've mentioned this before, we grew corn in North Carolina, near Asheville, North Carolina, and in the western part of the state. We grew corn with 12-foot stalks, 10 and 12-foot stalks. I mean, it was so tall. And we had a couple of men stand in front of it, and one man was about 5'10", a little under 6 foot, and the corn is about 12 feet taller than him in its dry state. It wasn't green, it was in its dry state when we were harvesting. And so this corn, this open pollinated corn that we grew, and it was beautiful, and it was so thick. The trunk was so thick, it was like a little tree. And the raccoons came over to push it over. And when they tried to push the corn over, guess what? The stalk didn't bend. And they weren't tall enough to climb it. So they tried to climb it and reach it, but it didn't work. And so they had to move on to other parts of the garden. And see, when you understand the nature of the soil and the nature of the laws of agriculture, which are very important, if you don't plant at the right time, then you're not going to be able to harvest at the right time. Planting too early or planting too late or planting in the wrong season. There's a reason why we plant in spring most things. And there's a reason why you plant in spring most things and you harvest in the summer. and by fall, your harvests are done. But in talking about evolution, creation, and science, you have to be able to, in the debate, deal with these things. Now, let me see if I can find the quote. I'm wondering if you know the history, and then I didn't mark the book that I'm going to be reading out of. I want to read to you Charles Darwin, when he wrote the book on the theory of evolution, and there are other things. When he wrote the book on the theory of evolution, he put in certain things, or the title of it. Hold on one moment. Let me give it to you right here. The name of the book by Charles Darwin that was written. Oh, there it is. Where is it? The name of the book was called Origin of the Species. And I apologize, I'm looking to it. I'm looking here. Okay, so The Origin of the Species was first published in 1859. 1859. The full title, On the Origin of the Species by Means of Natural Selection or the Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life, reveals the viciousness, it says in this book, of the underlying concept. This concept led directly to the two worst wars in the history of mankind. Did you know that World War I and II was over this book over the theory of evolution? Because you had two powers. You had those in the East, you had the Soviets and communism. And then you had the Nazis in Germany. The Soviets were in Russia, and the Nazis were in Germany. And they were socialists. They were national socialists. That's what the Nazi Party is. But the communists were international socialists. The only difference was them, but communism and socialism, they're the same thing, was just how it was to be implemented. But they were both based upon the theory of evolution. And again, the name of that book is so revealing. On the Origin of the Species by Means of Natural Selection or the Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. So wait a second. Just from the title, you understand. It can be understood, rather. I see it. Just from the title alone, it shows that evolution, the theory of evolution, is based in racism. And anyone who promotes the theory of evolution is also promoting racism, white supremacy, because that's what Darwin was teaching. He was teaching that there was a race that was favored above other races. And what race was that? That's the race that he belonged to. These are the people of eugenics, who later on took Darwinism and the theory of evolution and applied it to the social realm. And this is why you ended up with Jim Crow and all these things. And even now people are suffering from this thing. Now we're talking about health, because you can't talk about health without talking about science. And you can't talk about science without dealing with the fact that many scientists believe in the theory of evolution. And many scientists believe in the favored races. And people won't say that now, but you look at those who believe these things. They believe that certain races are feeble-minded and that they're not equal with other races. That's Darwinism. That's evolution. Meaning that the reason why certain races have more political power and more financial power is because they're a better race. They're better engineered. Now that is a frightening thought. But millions of people have died because of this theory. And even though the theory itself, the book itself, many scientists read it and it is just so full of foolishness. It's so full of so many things. And before we go, we're going to go to our break in just a few moments. But it's one thing that I really want to encourage you as you think about these things. Let me go back. A few years ago, and we had a Christian that was running against Donald Trump, a scientist, a doctor, Ben Carson. And I saw an interview with him, and he was speaking to people. And as this world-renowned physician, he was speaking with people regarding the. They were saying, "Well, what are you going to say when they ask you about the theory of evolution?" He goes, "Oh, I have an answer for that. What is their answer? I'm waiting for them to give me an explanation." He said his was very simple. He can point to a creator. He can point to a designer. He can point to a design over and over and over again. But the others, they're just so convoluted, and they're still looking for missing links, and they're still trying to claim this thing fits when it doesn't seem to fit. Now listen, just practically speaking, if evolution were true, wouldn't it be going on right now and right before our eyes? Wouldn't we have more things in transit in going from one species to another than we do? And it's a very popular thing, and all movies and all educational institutions, that they're founded upon this ideal. But the whole point of the theory of evolution is to do away with God and any responsibility that we have to him. To do away with any responsibility, that you and I have no responsibility to anyone but to ourselves. It is the theory of self. And whatever you have to do to do better and to get over on others. And so we're going to take a break as we move on in our podcast, but we're going to come back to these things, brothers and sisters. We're going to come back. This podcast is sponsored by 3asoh.com. That's 3asoh.com. This podcast is brought to you by 3asoh.com, and 3asoh.com is a health education platform. 3asoh.com is your home for health education, with upcoming courses like how to boost your immune system, overcoming stress and depression, water therapy, food therapy, healing with food, massage for life, healing with herbs, mind cures, growing healing foods. 8 upcoming classes coming to you soon, all from 3asoh.com for all of your health education needs. 3asoh.com with courses coming very, very soon. We're back. See, children are wonderful little scientists. Now, of course, they don't understand scientific theory, but they often are observers of things. And so, as they observe various things, they want to know how things work. That is what children do. They want to know how things work. I remember when my son was born, I thought of all the questions that my son might ask me, and I went to go look up the answers. Questions on where do babies come from, or Daddy, why is the sky blue, or what is the moon, and how did it get there, or what are those dots in the sky, and you name it. And so one of the things that I did was I went back and I searched out these things, and there are things I didn't know the answer to. There are many I didn't know the answer to, but I went back and I searched them out. I'm like, oh, and it helped me to understand so that I can give an answer. Why am I talking about this in science? The study of nature and its operations is a scientific study. It's called natural science. And you're seeing how things work. But I'm amazed at how people who study how things work do so from a point that is not reasonable. It doesn't make sense. It's like this. when I was going to school and I was in college and I was taking my anatomy class. And we're taking our anatomy class, and we had 3 cadavers in our classroom the entire time of our class. And so we had these 3 cadavers in our classroom, and we ended up working on these 3 cadavers. And a cadaver, for those who are listening, is just a dead body that was donated to science. And so we had these 3 cadavers in our classroom, and we got to poke and prod and look in them and do different things. But it always amazed me that the study of life and health in college and in the world is based in the study of death. Not the study of the living thing and its operation, but the study of the thing in its death. So we're trying to learn about life. Yes, I was in anatomy class, and so we're looking at something. And you really can't open up a person that's alive. We're not the Germans. We're not the Nazis or the Japanese in World War II or even others who have done these things from other countries who are researching with people that are alive. That's evil. That's wickedness. And I understand that you have to find out these things, and so I remember just looking at these things and wait a second, natural science, the study of nature and the operation of nature, not just the study of the thing when it's dead. Well, what's that have to do with evolution? See, the study of evolution, the theory of evolution, and now they call it a fact, but it's just because they've declared that they don't want any more debate on it. It's the statement that God is dead. And if God is dead, then why talk about him? You don't talk about the dead. But I don't know how God died because I don't know how he can die. But I do understand that when you're studying science, that it was not possible. The theory of evolution came about. Matter of fact, the first place where someone mentions in the scriptures that they don't believe in the existence of God was the kingdom of Egypt. Pharaoh. He said, "Who is the Lord that I should obey his voice? I know not the Lord, neither will I obey his voice to let Israel go." He denied the existence of God. And there were other nations that came around and they did likewise. They went further on. And this one, and the scriptures calls this kingdom a dragon kingdom because this kingdom was the denial of God's existence. And that is what evolution is. Anyone who believes in the theory of evolution, and there are hybrids. They said that, okay, God started everything, and that's what a deist is. He started everything and he just left it. He just walked away. He doesn't bother with it anymore. That's deism. But the belief that there is no God and that he did not create all things, of course, the scriptures, the Bible itself, denies all these things. God declares that he is the creator. Matter of fact, our scripture of the day, I'll give you our scripture of the day today. It's in Psalms 33. I'll read it to you from the book, Psalms 33, verses 6 and 9. Psalms 33, verse 6 and 9. Watch this. Psalms 33, 6 and 9. This is King David writing this. He's writing this psalm, and he's declaring what God has said. It says, "By the word of the Lord were the heavens made, and all the host of them by the breath of his mouth." Verse 9. "For he spake, and it was done. He commanded, and it stood fast." So the whole of creation was just from God speaking it into existence. Now, I don't know how you can measure that. It's just something that has to be accepted or rejected. Those who accept it, they have a foundation upon which they build. They study things throughout that. And up until this time period, you had different laws. Newton, Sir Isaac Newton. You had other individuals who studied the things of nature and the laws that govern them. The laws of thermodynamics, and the first law of thermodynamics, the second law of thermodynamics. You have the law of centrifugal force. You have the law of gravity. The whole thing about the apple falling out of the tree. Gravity. And so these are natural laws. And, the question is that did these things just happen to come about? Or were they brought forward or created, as it were? And during the 20th century, we saw this large expansion of the theory of evolution, of which, if you have read about Charles Darwin, he repudiated on his deathbed, fearing hell. But his theories lived on. Matter of fact, let me see if I can go to a couple of others. So I'm going to read to you from this book I'm reading. It's called The Evolution Handbook. It's published by a publisher. Let me look and see what they're called. This publisher is evolutionfacts.inc. Evolution Facts, written by a man by the name of Vance Farrow. And it's an introduction by Matthew Staver and Peter Ruckman. 150,000 copies in print. Over 3,000 scientific facts which annihilate evolutionary theory. And it just has it's just a book about the origins and histories of evolution. But it says this about Darwin. Charles Darwin, born 1809 to 1882, was born into wealth and able to have a life of ease. He took 2 years of medical school at Edinburgh University and then dropped out. It was the only scientific training he ever received. Because he spent the time in bars with his friends, he barely passed his courses. Darwin had no particular purpose in life, and his father planned to get him a nicely paid job as an Anglican minister. Darwin did not object. But an influential relative got him a position as the unpaid naturalist on a ship planning to sail around the world, the Beagle. The voyage lasted from December 1831 to October 1836. It is of interest that, after engaging in spiritism, that's spiritualism, certain men in history have been seized with a deep hatred of God and have then been guided to devise evil teachings that have destroyed large numbers of people, while others have engaged in warfare which have annihilated millions. In connection with this, we think of such known spiritists as Sigmund Freud and Adolf Hitler. Now, before this, I didn't know that Sigmund Freud was a spiritualist. Hitler, I did know. Continuing, quoting, "It is not commonly known that Charles Darwin, while a naturalist aboard the Beagle, was initiated into witchcraft in South America by nationals. During horseback travels into the interior, he took part in their ceremonies, and as a result, something happened to him. Upon his return to England, although his health was strangely weakened, he spent the rest of his life working on theories to destroy faith in the Creator. After leaving South America, Darwin was on the Galapagos Islands for a few days. While there, he saw some finches which had been blown in from South America and adapted to their environment, producing several subspecies. He was certain that this showed cross-species evolution, a change into a new species, but they were still finches. This theory about the finches was the primary evidence of evolution he brought back with him to England. Darwin, never a scientist, and knowing nothing about the practicalities of genetics, then married his first cousin, which resulted in all 7 of his children having physical or mental disorders. One girl died after birth, another at 10. His oldest daughter had a prolonged breakout at 15. 3 of his children became semi-invalids, and his last son was born mentally retarded and died 19 months after birth. That's a quote. His book, Origin of the Species, was first published in November 1859. The full title, On the Origin of the Species by Means of Natural Selection or the Preservation of Favored Races and the Struggle for Life, reveals the viciousness of the underlying concept. This concept led directly to 2 of the worst wars in the history of mankind. But watch this. This is my last quote. It says, in this book, Darwin reasoned from theory to facts and provided little evidence of what he had to say. Modern evolutionists are ashamed of the book with its ridiculous arguments. And then it goes through some of the things of his reasoning, and it goes through how foolish were some of the things that he said, and how he said that he would explain things further in a further book, but he even though he wrote many other books, he never went back. The theory of evolution is an excuse. It's an excuse to deny the humanity of other men and the rights of other men. The theory of evolution denies the existence of God, yes, and men do that all the time. But the theory of evolution gives license to the murder of others because they're not the favored races. And how does that affect health? Well, let's talk about it for a moment. Because Joseph Stalin believed in the theory of evolution, and he believed that what Darwin said was real, and he did not believe in the God of heaven or a creator, he thought that it was okay for him to starve millions of his own citizens who did not support him, who did not support the communist regime. He thought it was okay to kill the farmers, the wealthy class, as they called them, the bourgeois. Yeah, I think it's what Darwin quoted them as. Karl Marx, I think that is. Excuse me. And so they didn't have a problem killing off people that they did not like. It's natural selection. It doesn't matter. You're just made of flesh and bones, and when you die, nothing happens. You just go back into the ground. That's the theory of evolution. This is why the theory of evolution has no problem with killing babies. If you believe in a God, then you believe that all life is precious because you can take life, but man cannot give life. In the theory of evolution, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you do to people. It doesn't matter how you treat them, because this is the only life that you have, and you should make the best of it. That's the theory of evolution and its outcome. The Nazis believed in the theory of evolution, and you saw what they did with their scientists. There were trials. The Nuremberg trials had to deal with all these things. And many of their scientists, even though they advanced a lot of things, we get a lot of things from these Nazi scientists. The study on, when women get a mastectomy after they get breast cancer, mastectomies and hysterectomies and all these things, we got a lot of these from the German scientists from World War II that came over after Operation Paperclip, where the CIA went over to Germany and gave them new identities and brought them over to America to continue their research, albeit not the same way, at least I hope not. But the theory of evolution continued, and even now is continuing. As a matter of fact, if you try to say anything against the theory of evolution, and you go to college, you send your child to any school, any university, and unless that university is openly Christian, your children are going to be indoctrinated for 2 years, actually for all 4, but the first 2 years, they're not allowed to take their studies. You're not allowed to become a nurse just to go study nursing. You have to do your general studies, and your general studies will include the theory of evolution. And the theory of evolution is geared to breaking down any belief that there is a God, which kills any hope that you have in the restoration of humanity. Which means that you believe that now the government must be in control of all things, because there is the only true power on earth is he who holds the gun. Whoever has the most weapons and the biggest weapons, that's who's in charge. That is the theory of evolution. The means of natural selection. Who is the biggest and the strongest? So evolution is associated with racism. Evolution is associated with spiritualism. And evolution and science have been blended. And now watch this. Have you noticed anyone who goes and speaks against evolution? They're called heretics. Isn't a heretic someone who denies the faith? We're going to take a break, and this segment of this podcast is sponsored by someone very, very special. And that special person is you. You may want to know how you can become a partner with in health education with the School of Health Radio. Well, you can go to paypal.com and enter in the paypal.me/School of Health with no spaces. That is paypal.me/School of Health. There, and you can make a simply monthly donation. And we're asking for donations of $5 or more on a monthly basis to help support health education. Starting at $5 a month or more, you can help bring health to the world. This will support this health broadcast, so please join us as a monthly contributor. That is paypal.me/School of Health, no spaces. Thank you. So, evolution. You know, there have been great debates on evolution. Matter of fact, there was a great debate. It wasn't really that great, but it was a debate. It was called the Scopes trial. Anyone ever heard of the Scopes trial before? In the 1920s, matter of fact, you can look up, there's a movie regarding it. And the Scopes trial was dealing with some of the things that are brought up, and especially it was dealing with issues, and it was dealing with issues regarding Bible chronology. Because there was a man by the name of Bishop Ussher, and Bishop Ussher, he put in, and he made a chronology from the scriptures. He went down and he took the dates, or not the dates, but the histories of the things. He went through the days of Adam and Adam's sons, and all the way down through, and starting with that, he added all these things up, and he came to the idea that the earth was about 4,000 years old at the birth of Christ, and it's been 2,000, so it was approximately 6,000 years old. And so he took his dates, called Ussher's chronology, and they were placed in certain Bibles. They began to put the dates there. And so this was tested or contested at the Scopes trial, and actually subsequently, because of a couple of minor mistakes that were made with Ussher's chronology, they took them out. This is why you don't see dates anymore in your Bibles. But if you get some older Bibles, maybe from your grandmother, or you go to the used bookstore and you find some older Bibles that existed, in the mid-20th century, you'll see quite a bit of Bibles still had Ussher's chronology in them. And you can look it up. You can go online and find Ussher's chronology. But there has been a great debate about the theory of evolution versus creationism. But a lot of it has been like the debate that used to happen between the Sadducees and the Pharisees in the days of Christ. Because there were questions that the creationists and those who believe in intelligent design, that they could not answer, that are posed to them by those who believe in evolution. Some of those questions, you've heard of the old adage, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Well, actually, if you understand things as the scriptures define them about creation, is actually they came together. The chicken came full of eggs. This is one of those things. It's actually not difficult to understand. And there are explanations. I've heard many scientists. There's a man that I absolutely respect and love to hear him speak. His name is Professor Dr. Walter Veith. And his explanations, and I have seen some of his things, and he is a Christian. He was a zoologist. He was a scientist from South Africa. And I watched his testimony on how he became a Christian. He had been raised Catholic, of course. He's German background. And I watched how he discussed these things and what happened to him while he was teaching, while he was, he was a lecturer at the university, and how he ended up becoming professor and all these things, and how he went from spiritualism. And it was amazing to me. And I really encourage you to go on YouTube and look up Dr. Veith. That's Walter Veith, and his last name is spelled like Vieth, I believe, Veith. And just look at his testimony, and he has done so much research. As a matter of fact, I have one of his books, we'll be discussing it, about diet and health. But when you look at these things regarding health, and when you look at these things regarding the arguments and the debates over um, creationism versus evolution and evolutionary theory, which they now call evolutionary fact. They say the Big Bang is fact, but they can't prove any of it. A theory is something you cannot prove. But this is what all science nowadays is based upon in the 21st century. And in creation, everything was separated by kind. You know, the horses after their kind, and the cattle after their kind, the four-footed beast after their kind, and the fishes after their kind. And in the New Testament, it says that each one of them had a different kind of flesh. But you'll see that now here, what they're doing is they're taking things from one, because even though they can't prove evolution by having all of the different things that are these various different species that are, cross breeds, or that are in transition from one species to another, this evolutionary period, this evolutionary exchange. They can't prove any of that, and they always try to find something and then point at that one thing, but there should be, if it were true, so many. But from human beings, you get human beings. You don't get kitty cats. From dogs, you end up getting dogs. You don't get rhinoceroses. You understand? And there are some things that we can't explain, but but the overall, you see that species stay within species. But what man is doing, and this brings us back to Corona as we prepare to close, man is taking things from one species and combining it with things from another species, and it's not bringing great life. It's bringing death on a scale heretofore unheard of. That's what the Chinese are accused of. At least that's what they said. That's what an Italian news agency said that they found, and the video, you can look it up. Italian news agency in 2015 talked about the coronavirus, the work with bats, the Chinese, Wuhan, China. And the Chinese were very proud of this. They had pictures of the man going into the caves and getting the bats and taking samples. And talking about how he was defending his nation's borders by doing this biological research. Biological warfare. Science, falsely so called, because it is a bastardization of science. Rather than studying the life of a thing, they're taking the things that cause death and they're combining them and wondering why so many are dying. And then people are saying, it's like the little boy that lit the fire that burned down the field, and then he wanted to act like he didn't light the fire. And you and I are all going to be burned by this fire that's been lit, but regarding coronavirus, combining pathogens that exist in bats and rats and mice, crossing the species barrier. This dangerous thing because of the theory of evolution. Because the Chinese are evolutionists, they believe in Darwin's theory, in their own version of it, of course. Karl Marx and Darwin, the theories, one is a social experiment of the theory that was given on evolution. And so, as we prepare to close and bring back our final thoughts, I really want you to think about these. We talked about it before. Come now, let us reason together. Why are we in this pandemic? It's because people do not believe that species are not to be crossed. that science that violates this is Frankenscience. This is the, Frankenstein kind of things. Studying death and trying to bring life from death. But life comes from life, and death breeds more death. This segment is brought to you by 3A School of Health. School of Health radio broadcast can be found at anchor.fm/School of Health Radio. You can find this podcast on Spotify, Facebook, YouTube, iTunes, the Google Store, or anywhere where you can find your podcast. Just search for School of Health Radio. That is, again, School of Health radio broadcast can be found at anchor.fm/School of Health Radio. Spotify, Facebook, YouTube, iTunes, Google, or wherever you find your podcast. We have choices to make. What used to be the minority opinion, a very small minority opinion, with Charles Darwin and the people like him and those who came before him, and the one who wrote, he's the one that wrote that book, The Origin of the Species, or The Preservation of the Favored Races in Natural Selection. That Charles Darwin, that, we have a choice to, are we going to follow this thing or something else? What is the end result of these theories? What's the end result of the theory of evolution and the theory of creation? The theory of evolution is that there is no hope. Do our young people who believe in the theory of evolution and do our scientists who believe in the theory of evolution believe that there's hope for man? Well, you have some that hope, but their hope is in blending things from one species to another. Now, the scriptures teach that all men came from one blood, meaning one man, Adam. Adam, a clone was made, a female clone, and her name was Mrs. Adam, and she became Eve. And so you have here, all men upon the earth came from one pair, a man and a woman. Natural science. That all of us came from the loins of Adam and from the eggs of Eve. She's called the mother of all living. But if you don't believe that, what you end up doing is placing your hope in science that will either make you into something better. It will, yes, science has in many ways improved our lives. We've had definite improvements. The electricity is a definite improvement. The creation of the automobile is a definite improvement. The creation of the airplane, the creation of the helicopter, the creation of electricity and not, or just the harnessing of it. All of these things are tremendous. We have had a 5,000-year leap in technology in the foundation of this nation. Medical advances. But look at the track that we're headed on. Very soon, when they come up, I just read today that there's someone is very close to a vaccine. When they come up with a vaccine and you ask them, well, what's in it? How many species are in that vaccine? And they tell you that you have to take it, and if you don't, you're going to be forced to take it, and you're going to be given, some kind of ankle monitor or something like that, whatever they're going to do, for being a science denier. And that's what they call people now. If you don't believe in Darwin's theory of evolution, if you don't believe in the racist theory of evolution, if you don't believe in the spiritualist theory of evolution, well, that is an odd thing. That the nation founded upon promises to God and from God would declare that there is no God. So, it's been said that let us have health by choice and not by chance. You and I, we can be healthy. We can be wise and we can be encouraged because there is hope. This hope is not in us, but it is in the fact that we can be better than we are. This is the School of Health Radio, brought to you by 3asoh.com. And we want to thank our producer, Danny Ventura. And we want to thank all of you for joining us. Thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you again the next time. God bless.